You are watching NCN.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ChildLink's live broadcast. I am your host, Samantha Khan. I am the Advocacy and Communication Officer here at ChildLink. Today, we will be talking a bit about the effects of sexual assault on children. We have our lovely panelist, Miss Shaquita Thomas. She is the Guidance and Counseling Officer. Um, I would just like to inform the general public that this topic falls under the CRIE project. The CRIE project would be Community Responding in Emergency, and it would not be possible without the funding from the delegation of the European Union here in Guyana. So, of course, as always, I will give our viewers an opportunity to get to know our panelists, and then we will jump right into the program. Miss Thomas, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so a few of you may know me. My name is Shaquita Thomas. I worked with ChildLinK as a communications officer once. However, now I am functioning in the capacity of guidance and counseling officer through the Ministry of Education. I am currently attached to the Mackenzie High School in Linden. Yes, so that's it. I'm very passionate about childcare, children's welfare, and everything, the holistic development of children.
Thank you so much, Miss Thomas. We can definitely see that passion and excitement on your beautiful face.
Yes, thank you.
So, tell us, what is sexual assault? How is that defined?
Okay, so sexual assault is basically the umbrella term used to describe any sexual activity that acts or happens without consent. So, any sexual activity, touching, groping, any sexual activity without consent.
Okay, definitely. And what is consent, since you've mentioned consent? What is consent? And can
I'm
children
happy
give
you
that consent?
I'm happy you asked that because consent is a very controversial topic. A lot of people there are a lot of arguments and studies into what consent can be, but there is one definition on consent that I stand by, and that is consent is an agreement to do the same thing in the same way. And when you say the same thing in the same way, doing the same thing, meaning communicating with our partners that this is what is going to be done, this is what we are going to do together. And when I say at the same time, what that means is that it must be given continuously or continually, right? So, do you want to keep going? Do you want to do more? And so, I made that statement to say that I can give consent but withdraw it in the moment of the act. So it is important that it is, we're doing the same thing, we're in agreement, and it is also important that we're doing it the same way because I can give consent to a kiss, but that does not mean that I give consent to a touch. So you can kiss me, but you can't touch me. And children cannot give consent. You ask, can a child give consent? Well, children are not developmentally able to make certain decisions about certain things, right? And this includes engaging in sexual acts and sexual behavior. Well, the age of consent in Guyana is 16, and that is for heterosexual activities, right? A child's permission does not equal consent. Even if a child or a teenager gives permission or acts willingly, it never implies consent because he or she is developmentally unable to make certain decisions. A child is also never accountable. I need people to understand, because a lot of times in our society we hear, people would say, especially when it's instances where we have the teenagers that are close to the age of consent, 14 and 15. Oh, she went here, she went there, she want man, she did this, he did this, he went here, he went there, he went for it, he called for it. But what I would like for you to really understand is permission does not equal consent. As long as that child is not able, or don't let me say child, as long as that teenager is not able to give consent, then, or is not the age of consent, then no matter what he or she says, you know, they cannot give consent. It is not illegal. A child's permission or even a request to play sexual games or look at something sexual, it never excused the adult or teen from taking full responsibility of their action, because as adults and as older teenagers, 18, 19, you have a certain level of knowledge with regards to sexual activity, and you might have had some exposure, and in most cases would have had exposure to have brought it to a child. And so then when you commit the act, then you have to take full responsibility, because no matter what, a child cannot give consent.
Thank you so much, Miss Thomas. I absolutely love that you stressed on that. And also towards the fact for adults, even though an adult may give consent, they can withdraw that at any point in time. I think a lot of people don't know that. Even though you say, okay, it's fine, and I would like to do this now, I would like to be involved in anything that's sexual, but then for some reason or the other, 5 minutes from now, you change your mind, that's okay too.
Yes, yes. And that's why I kept, I stick with the definition of consent being, an agreement at the same time. It must be the same time, the same thing, the same way. You understand? Not because someone give you consent to touch them in a way, you must take the liberty to touch them another way, because then that person in their right may feel violated. And so it is important that you ask questions. You find out, is it okay for me to do this? Is it okay for me that to do that? And in the event that someone declines him, no, I'm not comfortable with this. You could be in the heat of the moment and someone says, you know what, please stop, stop, then consent is gone. Anything after that is sexual assault.
And how would a child know that they're actually being sexually assaulted? Like, what are the acts that would be meted out to them?
All right. So when a child is how a child can know if he or she is being sexually assaulted, it can be based on the act of the perpetrator. Sometimes they may try to touch them in uncomfortable or inappropriate ways, and they may say to them things like, don't tell mommy, don't tell daddy, or don't tell nobody I touched your breast, don't tell nobody I touched your private part, because if you tell them, they're going to beat you. And they try to use manipulation and these tactics. A lot of times what you find happening is that perpetrators would try to, well, ChildLinK would have done a study that shows that the majority of perpetrators are family members and known adults, because they have access to children. So they would use those opportunities to act out their own sexual desires. Things like exposing children to pornography, playing sexual games, talking to children about sex. So as a child, if an adult is bringing anything about you to you about sex that is inappropriate, and when I say inappropriate, what I mean, it is not for your information, it is not to safeguard you, it is not to protect you in any way, but it's basically to take advantage of you, then that is a sign that he or she is, perpetrating sexual assault.
Yes, definitely. And to add to that, I think maybe a lot of people don't focus on this, but also if there is any form of sexual acts that are being asked of the child to perform, maybe on an inanimate object or maybe on an animal, that's also sexual assault. If it's being performed in front of the child, also sexual assault.
Yes.
So we know that assault of any kind is never the victim's fault. At no point in time is it ever the victim's fault. However, there can be some risk factors that may increase the likelihood of sexual assault occurring. What would you say are these factors?
Okay, Miss Khan, like you would have mentioned, and I want to reinforce that sexual assault is never justifiable and it is never the victim's fault, right? However, there are some factors that may make a child vulnerable to sexual assault because what perpetrators do is they look for children who they believe they can get away with assaulting them, right? And one that I always stress on is misunderstanding boundaries. When children do not understand what sexual boundaries are, when I say sexual boundaries, I'm not saying that you're going to take it to your 1 year old child to say, oh, this is sex, this is what, this is that. No, but you teach them what their private parts are, their different reproductive organs, their mouth, and you also teach them that these are inappropriate touch and these are appropriate touch. And so if someone touch you in this way, then you should let somebody who you trust know, let mommy know, let daddy know. If someone makes you feel uncomfortable, tell mommy or tell daddy. So you teach your child to create that boundary and have that understanding when inappropriate touch is happening, when sexual assault is happening, so they're able to distinguish when something is right, when a touch is right from when it is wrong, right? And so I feel like that is a key factor in children being more vulnerable to sexual assault. Also, what we see a lot is low self-esteem. Now, children with low self-esteem are especially vulnerable because oftentimes they're looking for attention, affection, acceptance, admiration. And so a lot of times perpetrators will use the lack that that child is facing or whatever it is that he or she is looking for to basically prey on that child. They're going to come, oh, I'm listening to you, oh, I love you, oh, you need this, oh, I'm going to do this. Basically groom that child into sexual assault. Something that I often speak to parents about is unmonitored access to technology. When children have access to technology and it is not being monitored, then it becomes a playground for perpetrators because not only can sexual assault occur from persons that are around them or trusted person, but they're random people on the internet. I have an insect flying around, sorry. They're random people on the internet who will try to reach out to them, have inappropriate conversation, tell them things, send me this, send me that. It is also important for parents to have a strong line of communication with their children. So when children have poor communication or poor communication or breakdown in communication with their parents, what you find, they become isolated, they're insecure, and therefore they become more susceptible to perpetrators grooming. And so it is important for us to educate our children, safeguard our children, communicate with our children. It is also important for us to affirm our children, let them know that they're enough, and all of these are areas in which you can safeguard your children because, the lack in these areas can lead to serious issues.
Definitely, you have raised some very strong and relatable points. And to add to that, I would like to say that substance abuse, abuse of substance in the home, is one of the major factors. Let's say that the child has parents who are alcoholics or drug users. That would lead to them being unsupervised. It means that the parents wouldn't be paying much attention to the children, and that's going to leave room for other persons to prey on them because they know that they're not being supervised. They know that the children aren't being cared for in the way that they should be.
Yeah, yeah.
Another
I think in homes where domestic violence occurs, abuse is prominent. You find a lot of time children go out looking for what did they lack in the home, and as a result, a lot of people take advantage of that. They take advantage of that lack.
I've seen it happen so many times. And another factor could definitely be if it is that the child was already abused or assaulted in the past. There's a high possibility that it may occur again. So, as parents, guardians, once you already know that this has happened, it's for you to even pay more attention to your child or children and guide
Yeah.
them in the correct path.
And let me add, children living with disabilities are also, at risk of sexual abuse because of a lot of stigma attached to a child living with a disability. And so, what you find happening is that because of the stigma, people would say he or she know what they're saying, and because perpetrators are aware of these cultural stigmas attached to persons living with disabilities, then they will more than likely use that to their advantage.
Yes, I'm so glad that you raised that point. Even for persons who may not be in the position to say, oh, this happened to me or that happened to me, maybe because they cannot speak, then for persons like that, it's very important for caretakers to know who's coming into their homes and pay attention to those children.
And let me just add, Miss Khan, I would often say, because you see a lot of children who have different disabilities in the system, and I would often say learn your child's ability and learn your child's disability, and in that learn how they communicate, learn and understand how they communicate, how they learn, and by doing that you can educate. And so when you can educate, then they can have an idea. Even if not 100% the understanding, they can have an idea of what is appropriate and what is inappropriate.
Yes, definitely. Another point that I will definitely like to add to all of the great points that you've mentioned, Ms. Thomas, is the community aspect of it. Let's say you have a community that's not serious about sexual assault, that does not pay attention to children that are being sexually assaulted, or does not advise on going to the police, for example, going to the police or the necessary agency in order to report such issues, then that could definitely be a strong factor for sexual assault occurring because the perpetrator will be on the outside saying, oh, well, nobody here is paying attention. The parents not paying attention. The neighbors not paying attention. Community leaders aren't paying attention. So then it's like they can do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree so much with that. I feel as though we all have a role to play in safeguarding and protecting our children. And it is upon us as social service providers, it is upon us as family members, parents to protect our children. Do not allow them to, or I don't want to say do not allow them, but safeguard them as much as possible from having to have these traumatic experiences.
Yes, definitely. So, on to our other question. What are some of the physical signs that are likely to indicate that sexual assault has occurred?
Okay. In some instances, let me see, their sexual assault to the maximum of just touch up. Don't let me say just because it's never just of touching, where a perpetrator inappropriately would touch a child. However, this may not leave a mark per se. However, what you will find though is that that child may have trouble sleeping, that child may throw a tantrum when that person comes around. They do not want to be around them. They feel uncomfortable around them, and you find that the child's sleeping pattern may change. The child may not want to sleep, or the child may sleep excessively because he or she does not know how to cope with what they are experiencing. Physical pain or itching in the genital areas in instances of rape, and in some instances inappropriate touch. It depends on the level of sexual assault. It depends on how I'm trying to watch my terms here. It depends on how intense it was. Not saying that a touch is not as bad as forceful rape. However, when finding evidence, let's say forceful rape would have occurred, you may have things like rectal bleeding, problems walking or sitting, soiling or wetting their clothes, stomach aches, and you may find underwear that are stained with blood or other form of discharge, right? So it's all on the parent, the guardian, the caregiver to look out for these physical signs. Observe your children. I know some of our children, and I don't intend to give anyone paranoia. However, the intent here is to highlight the importance of protecting your children, because at the end of the day, that is what your duty is as a caregiver or a parent. So, as a parent, you should know that you are responsible, or understand that it is your responsibility to check your children. Look at how different he or she is moving, how he or she is acting, and look into it.
Yes, definitely. Now, in the event that there are no physical signs, what would you say are some of the emotional, sorry, or mental signs?
Okay, so what you find is a lot of these children have behavioral concerns. They have a sudden change in their behavior. You find a child who is, normally happy go lucky, talking, would talk a lot, outgoing, become very withdrawn to themselves, may not want to be touched. Or you may find a child who would normally like to hug and, hug you and touch you, maybe give you a smack in your cheek as the parent. He or she may not want to be touched in those ways or in any other way. Some children become delinquent. They start acting out because they do not know how to handle the emotion, they do not know how to cope, and they do not know how to deal with the trauma that they would have experienced. Some children start to self harm, especially in the teenage years. You find a lot of them cutting themselves. They cut their inner thigh, they cut their wrists, and they begin to act out these risky behaviors. Because what happens is that a lot of times when sexual assault occurred, some children may experience something we call disassociation. And so they do not feel valuable. They do not feel important. They feel used, and so they start to mutilate their own bodies. And then some children may show persistent sex play with their friends. So you see a child trying to touch other children's genital, wanting to see it, basically exploring an experience. And they're curious. They want to know, do you have what I have? Have you ever been touched? Did they try to touch others, or they request for other children to touch them? Those are some signs that you have to look out for in your children's behavior. Also, those are some signs that children who were sexually assaulted may act out. Now, children may have things like anger outbursts because of everything that they're dealing with, especially in instances where the sexual assault was not disclosed, or in instances where it was disclosed, but they're still not given the support, or even if they're given the support in some instances, they do not know how to cope well or handle all that is happening with them. So they lash out, they become angry, they become in our society or culture we would say they become very disrespectful. Some children may experience some level of anxiety. Some of them may not want to be alone with this individual. their sexual knowledge and language and all of these things change, because especially in older children, what you find is that after they would have had this experience, they go and they try to research, or they try to get information on what was it that really happened to me.
Oh, definitely. I'm so glad that you raised the point of self harm and being hypersexual. With self harm, I've heard persons said, "Oh, I don't know what's wrong with this person, with this child. Oh, some demon got into this child. Now this child is cutting herself, or this child is cutting himself." All right. And also, you would hear persons say, "Oh, because they're a teenager, it's okay or it's normal for them to be hypersexual." When individuals, parents, caregivers, you've observed any of the signs that Miss Thomas has just mentioned, which are some very important ones. There are many times that your child may not want to talk to you, but it's important for you to ask fact-finding question to see if you can arrive at a conclusion. If not, there are a lot of counselors that are going to be available. They may not confide in you, but they may very much confide in a counselor. Definitely take it into consideration, and you can definitely reach out to a counselor.
And I would even say to parents with younger children, like infants. I'm a mother of an infant myself, and I would often encourage them to, look at your children. You know them. You understand your child, and you can study your child. See how he or she is acting differently. Check their private parts. You know, be like, look out for these things. Look at your children's sleeping pattern. Look at how your child is acting in the company of one person versus another person, right? And so it is the responsibility is upon us as parents and caregivers to just be vigilant, be as observant as possible with regards to the, or when concerning with the welfare of our children.
Definitely. So let's say in the event the parent or the caregiver has observed and has come to a conclusion that this may have occurred, that sexual assault may have occurred. What is it that they can do from then on out?
Immediately, if you learn that, or you see that you're, in some instances, even suspect that your child or children is being sexually assaulted, contact the Child Care and Protection Agency. Go to a police station close to you, because I don't think the agency have offices in all communities. However, I'm not sure. Don't let me give them out liberty there. However, I would advise you to go to the police station, make a report, reach out to the Child Care and Protection Agency, make a report. But whatever you do, do not, and I cannot stress this more, do not keep it a secret. Report it.
Definitely. So that's definitely the procedure. The first thing would be the police. It's not childcare. Childcare comes after. The police is
Police.
the first place that you go to report because it's a crime. So you go to the
Yes.
police for that. And then childcare will be involved. And of course, trauma therapy will be provided to your
Yes.
child. Your child will be helped along the way. If it is that the agency sees that, okay, we need to help the family, that can also be done to help the family as a unit.
Yes.
So it seems, since we have already mentioned what the parents can do in terms of what child care or child protection can do in terms of assisting the child, what would you say that would be done after they have reported the issue and then child care steps in?
Okay, so I'm a guidance and counseling officer. However, from the knowledge that I would have gained through referrals, what happens is that child, the police would contact the Child Care and Protection Agency, and the agency would take it from there, of course, with the police and other partners or stakeholders. In some instances, the child would be brought in, or if not all, would be brought in for a session with the probation officer or a social worker. And it basically goes on from there. But what I can say for sure is that everything that is done from there forth is done in the best interest of the child. There's prevention from re-victimizing, so that's where they do forensic interviews, so that child would not have to attend court, and go before a judge, a magistrate, a judge, or even have to face the perpetrator again. So basically, what the Child Care and Protection Agency would do is basically cushion the process for the child. So he or she is given justice while an investigation is carried out, and he or she is catered for throughout the entire process and given justice.
The victim, we try to make this process for the child as easy as possible.
Possible, yes. Everything is done in the best interest of the child.
Definitely. So we have come to the end of the program. Miss Thomas, you have been great. You've definitely left a lot of information with the public. What would be some of the closing remarks that you'd like to give before we end the program?
I would like to endorse a statement made by Ms. Green where she said child care or child protection is everybody's business. And so if you're a neighbor, if you're a friend, if you're just someone, you go to visit a family and you notice something going on with a child in the community, my advice to you would be to report it. If you are a parent, be vigilant, be observant. Your first loyalty is to your child. It is important for you to protect your child because the developmental stage of children, everything that they experience, everything that they go through, will directly impact their adult lives. And so, as parents, the least we can do as communities, as Guyanese, let me put that out there, right? We owe it to children to create safe environments, safe communities, safe families for them to grow up in. It is important that we cater to their welfare. Children are not deserving of anything violent, anything vile, anything bad. They should be given a fair chance to grow up. They should be given a fair chance at life. And so we as adults are responsible for helping to provide such.
And I agree with everything that you've just said. Now, children are our future. When this generation is gone, then the next would be a generation that's younger. Children are the future of this nation, and it's imperative that we create a safe space for them at all times so that they can have a healthy future. Now,
Yes.
if anyone would like to contact ChildLinK, of course, you can do so. You can give us a call. Our phone number is 233 or 233 3502. You can also check us out on our social media pages. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. All of those handles would be ChildLinK Guyana or ChildLinK Inc. Ms. Thomas, I thank you so much for being a part of the program. I thank the viewers for
To be here.